Stephen is, Stephen was born in 1937 in Budapest, Hungary, to a non-observant family of Jewish heritage. From 1944, his family was hiding from the Nazis. His father was deported to Belsen and Theresienstadt, and his mother and siblings and he were in hiding on false papers. Though Stephen left Hungary for the UK following the 1956 uprising in Hungary, and he spent his professional career in the UK as an architect. Stephen was a Labour Party member from 1997 until I think 2023 in St Holborn and St Pancras CLP with Starmer, until he was suspended by the Labour Party following his speaking at our meeting on Holocaust Memorial Day 2 years ago. So welcome, Stephen. It's good to see you, and over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther, and thank you for inviting me to this webinar. With your permission, I will be concentrating on a series of short episodes, events of the World War II Holocaust in Budapest, with direct or indirect connection to my own lived experience. I can find no more fitting way of keeping the memory of the victims alive. We all know about the horrors of the camps and the massacres of the SS special groups in occupied parts of the Soviet Union, but elsewhere too, the horrors and dehumanizing atrocities were all pervasive. I repeat first that with these stories, we are in 1944 Budapest, mostly after the German occupation of March 1944, and the arrival of Eichmann and the Gestapo in the wake of the Wehrmacht troops. I was 7 years old, now 87. First, arrests and executions. Following liberation of Budapest in 1945, February, March, I returned to my primary school, Form 2, in late 45. We had fixed double desks for pairs of pupils, and my deskmate rather, was one Yuri George Ligeti. He was rounded up in 44 together with his mother by the Hungarian fascist militia, the Arrow Cross. They were immediately taken to the banks of the Danube, not to the stretch of steps where you can sit by the river, but to a high part of the embankment with a great drop. They were lined up with others and shot into the river. Yuri was holding his mother's hand, and they fell together, with his mother sinking at once beside him. Yuri was only shot in the upper arm, and the river took him downstream rapidly. He managed to scramble out eventually and was overlooked from a nearby building and was rescued and hidden until Liberation Day. Yuri was the brightest pupil in our class, but super nervous, traumatized for life. Secondly, torn apart families. Rules kept changing fast, and Jews weren't allowed to use public transport. Trains not at all, trams at certain times only at the rear of carriages. By that time, I was taken into hiding with a false name on false papers as Gentile, war refugee, an escapee from the advancing Red Army. We were housed in homes sponsored by the Protestant churches and the Swiss Red Cross. Housed in the same home was an older boy of about 11, 12 years of age. How did he get there? He was traveling on a crowded tram with his parents at the back of the first carriage. Being curious, he moved forward to stand behind the driver and watch him operating the levers. There was no separate driver's enclosure or compartment, only a separating bar. Suddenly, the Arrow Cross got on and was raiding at the next stop, hunting for Jews to arrest. His parents fell into the trap, but he himself was well separated from them and oblivious to the raid. The parents had an instantaneous decision to make, to call to him and get him arrested too, or keep him safe. They didn't call to him. They were taken off the tram and were deported to Auschwitz. They never said goodbye to each other or seen each other again. The trauma and pain of the parents' decision and of the child discovering his abandonment is not easily imagined. Life and death decisions based on mere rumors was another evil. My father and two uncles were involved with the infamous Kastner project. Rudolf Kastner, a prominent Zionist leader from Transylvania, negotiated a deal with Eichmann and Himmler himself to save about 1,600 middle-class, mostly Transylvanian Jews, in return for money and goods in kind, including trucks to be used on the Eastern Front. The saved Jews were to be transported to Belsen in transit and to be freed from there in Switzerland. I wonder, how could my father trust a deal with the SS and go to Belsen as part of a deal? The answer must lie in the alternative. The alternative was to be called up into the Jewish work brigades attached to the Hungarian army under intensely anti-Semitic officers and used as mine clearers on the Eastern Front. But the decision trusting your enemy must have been agonizing, potentially being torn from the family for good. He did get stuck in Belsen and later transferred to Theresienstadt, but survived. The pain of paralysis when a loved one is threatened. My aunt Erzsi was returning her young niece, Ilonka, after a stay with her to her home in the south of Hungary. At the railway station, as Ilonka was about to board the train, she was stopped by the Arrow Cross and was arrested as an identified Jew. My aunt Erzsi was witnessing this, but couldn't intervene without also bringing arrest on her own head. I still remember my aunt's screaming breakdown on her return to home due to this trauma and sense of guilt over her inability to help. Hard to imagine the pain of the situation. Ilonka was deported to Auschwitz, but put to work there and returned. And then there was a double jeopardy of the disabled. My large Transylvanian extended farming family became seriously endangered when Hitler gifted their part of the region from Romania back to Hungary. They came under the rule of collaborationist Admiral Horthy and later of the Arrow Cross. Some of the Romanian workers were aware of their plight and offered to take them by horse and cart through secret passages to the Romanian border and into relative safety. But an elderly uncle was too fragile for such a bumpy journey, they felt, and turned down the offer. As a result, 7 adults, 6 children were taken to Auschwitz, and only 1 teenager returned. And finally, the indifference of the public the averting of the eyes. When my father was transported to Belgium in hot, stuffy, closed wagons, soon they were desperate for water. At several stops, still within Hungary, a trade developed by the locals standing by the platforms, a gold wedding ring for a glass of water. A small illustration of the general lack of empathy, the averting of the eyes that made the Holocaust possible. In these few lived examples, important warnings are buried. Every one of them rhymes with essentially similar examples of sufferings by the heroic peoples of Gaza and Palestine. The same, but on steroids. For me, this is the ultimate message of Holocaust Memorial Day. Never again. Never again for any people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen.